welcome back to the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and today we're going to be talking a little bit of free agency recaps. So you're going to see that information from me today. Coming to you live solo for the first time in a little while. Haven't had a chance to not go solo there. The NBA Free Agency Recap Podcast, we're calling this. Just first of all, I want to say thank you for all the support over the last couple of weeks. I'm recording this just after 4th of July on July 5th. I'm very, very happy to say that all the NBA Finals stuff was really fun and went really well with Grayson. Thank you to him for coming on and doing that. Thank you to Ryan for helping with the draft recap now 2 years in a row, which is really cool. The memory for that popped up as well recently, so shout out to Ryan Hammer for that. A lot of really great stuff coming. I know that the podcasts have been all over the place and sparing, but I appreciate the support that has been out there on when we've been doing podcasts, so it's very, very appreciated. And they're going to be coming again pretty sporadically right now because I'll be moving in less than a week here. So hopefully a new setup there, nice new office and my new home. Very, very excited. Have some really cool stuff coming for you guys from a content-wise standpoint, as well as a lot of written stuff is coming out as it already has on house-enterprise.com. Shout out to House Enterprise for having me as a podcaster and as a writer. Shout out to House-Enterprise. House-Enterprise is where you'll see my work regarding the state rankings image, which is you'll see on YouTube. I'll throw it up on the screen as well, but the link will be below for everything you see on the podcast apps, YouTube, etc. I got to get back into the flow of doing these shows and stuff. I'm not used to talking to myself just yet, but super excited how that piece turned out. It's part one of a 5-part series of power ranking the states of the United States based on basketball achievement. So that piece has taken many, many months to put together. Shout out to Phil for helping me with the editing and the nuances and checking all the stuff. But super excited to putting that one out. So that will be linked in the description below. House-Enterprise is where you can find that work. Don't forget that we're always just as we have many, many times before, partnered with SeatGeek. Code 2-Pointer for $20 off your first order. I went to some really cool concerts over the last couple of weeks. Had some really great promotions there with SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase. You can do the same thing. Code 2-Pointers. You'll see it on YouTube at the bottom of the screen. If you're listening, it is TWOPOINTERS in your cart at checkout in the app or online, SeatGeek.com. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring the Two Pointers Podcast, as always. So, thank you for dealing with my 2.5 to 3 minute rambling there. But this is going to be a really fun episode. I'm very excited to talk about free agency. I've got the NBA.com news tracker here of every single team. We're just going to go in alphabetical order, going from Atlanta, Boston, Brooklyn, and so on and so forth. I'm going to give you some quick hits there on my thoughts because this has been, with everything we know about the NBA and its news cycle, this has been a pretty quiet free agency, I will say, just from a logistical standpoint, from a big star getting moved. As I'm recording this, just for context, July 5th at 3:32 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Damian Lillard has not been traded, and obviously if you're listening to this and he obviously has not aged well, and I will try my best before this goes out to adjust for a Damian Lillard trade, but based on what we know right now at the top, Damian Lillard obviously really only wants to go to the Heat, according to most reputable sources around his team and his camp. And let's be real, I don't really know or understand why they would abide by those asks or by those rules, right? Like, they don't have to give Damian Lillard what he wants or what he thinks. So this might drag on for months. That was what I said a few weeks ago on some other podcasts, as well as on here, talking about a little bit about what we thought about where Damian Lillard might go. This may drag on for weeks, even months, right? And we know that the Blazers have a young core, and they're building a young core. So he's obviously not going to be traded for 40 cents on the dollar. He's an NBA top 75 player all time. Whether you agree with it or not, he's one of the best Blazers of all time, if not the best Blazer of all time. So, they're going to do by the organization regardless of his stature. But if he wants to go somewhere specific, that's not always, the case. I know we saw that with Kawhi Leonard going from San Antonio and being traded to Toronto for the 1 year, obviously winning a title there. But we've seen some other instances as well, right? So I think all things considered, this drags on, and I'm just going to exclude it from this conversation because I'd like to talk about it with somebody, and holding out for wherever he goes. I'll hopefully have a guest that that tailors to that team. If it's probably Miami, it's probably Michael Davis. So shout out to Michael Davis out of pocket. So the Atlanta Hawks currently, according to the NBA free agency tracker, and of course, if there's anything that's missed throughout this, this is literally just the free agency tracker, making sure it's not like all different types of stuff. Offseason trade tracker. This is just the whole full thing. If I miss anything, please let me know if I think of anything that's not on here. But this was updated this morning at 8:30 a.m. So the Hawks, only thing they've done right now is they acquired Rudy Gay when they sent out the John Collins part of the John Collins deal. They acquired Rudy Gay via trade, so obviously nothing really to think about there. The Boston Celtics signed O'Shea Brissett. Shout out to O'Shea Brissett from that draft class. That was, I thought the kid was going to be unbelievable. Agrees to a 2-year deal, and then Kristaps Porzingis is part of that 3-team trade with the Wizards and the Grizzlies that sent Marcus Smart to Memphis. Some other underlying pieces to the Wizards, and then Kristaps Porzingis is sent to Boston. I don't think I've publicly commented on this, and I'll just be completely clear. I think this isn't good or isn't bad for Boston. I know that Marcus Smart is, 9 to 11 years there or something like that. Been around for a long time, been in over 100 playoff games as a Celtic. So meant a lot to that city and to that franchise. And all things considered, he's somebody that, I think if you understand, from a financial aspect where that was going to put them in the future with obviously they're probably going to sign Jaylen Brown as we're recording this now, has not signed his $50+ million contract just yet per year. But I don't know. I'm not saying Marcus is a guy they should have kept forever, but at the same time, I understand why they did this deal. And for able to get a team friendly deal out of Kristaps, granted they are going to pay him something like $30 million each year for the next 2 years, but I think there's some team friendly options there at the end of the contract. But some games played incentives are in there somewhere as well. But Kristaps Porzingis, I do think helps some of what Boston needs. They obviously are a 3-point shooting team already. He does that very well at his position, and he was one of the best, rim switchable, type defenders this year when it comes to his rim defending as well as some of his pick and roll switching. So a lot of that stuff from second spectrum there. Kristaps Porzingis was really good last year, and if his first fully healthy season really ever other than his rookie year, I think this is a good deal all around. I know originally Malcolm Brogdon was the piece that was probably being moved, and the Clippers failed he failed the Clippers physical, or they didn't like the physical results. And look, I don't blame them taking in a guy that, even though he won Sixth Man of the Year, he was still very injury prone and wasn't available for most of Boston's key moments in the playoffs. I think Kristaps Porzingis is a good deal for him. I think this is a good deal for Boston ultimately. I know giving up Marcus Smart hurt, but, crazier things have happened for a quality role player of his type. The Brooklyn Nets returned Cam Johnson on a 4-year deal. I don't have any of the dollar amounts in front of me right now, so just take that with a grain of salt. I think some of the dollar amounts, all things considered, there really isn't an overpay right now because of the second apron of the new CBA is not going to kick in for a while. Some of these teams, some of these guys like Cam Johnson, unless the team was going to completely overpay for him, Brooklyn would have been dumb not to bring him back at any dollar amount, whether it was on a match or whether it wasn't. So makes complete sense for whatever the dollar amount is. I have not seen, from what I remember off the top of my head recording this, I have not seen any dollar amounts that completely just blew me out of the water. I was like, whoa. So again, I don't think it's relevant for this conversation. But Cam Johnson returns on a 4-year deal. Love it. I think there was no place other than Brooklyn that made any sense for both parties. Again, the same thing though, RFA. Why would Brooklyn not bring him back? He's a very valuable piece. He's what you want out of a guy that's probably going to make that much money in the new CBA anyway. So I really like Cam Johnson. I like what he brings. Dennis Smith Jr. Leaves the Charlotte Hornets to go to Brooklyn on a 1-year deal. He was a big reason for their defense at the end of the year last year. I'm a big Dennis Smith Jr. guy from, being right down the road from where he's from. Went to NC State, of course. I think this is a good deal, kind of a prove-it next contract deal, and hopefully him and Cam Thomas and some of the other guard rotations there can kind of figure out the minutes because I do think he needs to play, and I think he'll help them win games. And then Lonnie Walker, same deal, showed that he can get back into an NBA role, an NBA groove with the Lakers last year. Obviously was very good in spot minutes and honestly in unreliable situations because, when you don't have a guy play for 9 playoff games and then all of a sudden need him for a game 6 like they did against, I think it was Golden State, he can come in and fill those roles. So I think, with the ball in his hands and a team like Brooklyn, I think Brooklyn's going to be a lot better than people think they are next year. They're not going to obviously be, 6th seed in the East probably, just because of where KD and Kyrie and that team got to before all of the trades took place last at deadline. That sent Kevin Durant obviously to Phoenix, and Kyrie Irving to Dallas Mavericks, of course. But I think Brooklyn's in a great place. I think they're doing really smart moves. They're using the cap space efficiently, and I really liked their draft haul with Clowney, Whitehead, and Jalen Wilson. So all things considered, Brooklyn, big winner for me in the free agency market. Charlotte, whether you think they made the right pick or wrong pick in the draft, this is not that conversation, but they inked LaMelo Ball to his $260-some-odd million 5-year deal. From the 2020 draft class. Those guys are getting fat extensions right now. Tyrese Halliburton, Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, all three of those guys signed really, really big deals. Obviously, unfortunately, not for James Wiseman there, number 2 in that draft. We'll get to his team in a little bit. But the Charlotte Hornets inked their guy for 5 years. Obviously, this does not make him untradeable by any stretch of the imagination if things go south or he's unhappy or whatever. But this at least gets your future lockdown. Like, this is your guy for the next 5 years on this big contract. Now you know how your finances are going to look, and you're going to be able to work around that deal and understand what's the best. They also did extend a qualifying offer to make Miles Bridges, I think it was like $9 million or such, to make him an unrestricted free agent next year. So that doesn't mean Miles Bridges is walking and going somewhere else, but it definitely loses the bargaining power for the Charlotte Hornets being able to offer him a contract. I just don't know what the market is for him just yet, so I think he's going to get through that 10-game suspension, come out and have to prove it. He's going to be on a prove himself kind of deal because of, obviously what put him out of basketball last year. I do think ultimately he'll have a good year if he comes in and he has the same chemistry with LaMelo he did last year. So I'm not shocked if Miles Bridges has another great season and we look back on it and some team gets him for a steal, like a 4-year, $80 million or whatever, right? His market value probably is more than that, but, again, all things considered, factors involved. So going to be interesting. I think Charlotte's free agency is going to be more interesting next year. They do have the ability to, as of right now, I believe P.J. Washington has not signed anything. It's not reported on here, so obviously I'm going with what I have in front of me, but I'm happy with LaMelo being on that 5-year ink deal. Should be good to go for the next 4 to 5 years. Chicago Bulls, Javon Carter agrees to a 3-year deal, leaving the Bucks. Very stout defender. I think will be really good for their guard rotation. Problem is there's 72 guards in the Bulls backcourt. I don't know what they're going to do. Torrey Craig, my guess would be one of these guys is gone at the deadline. Kobe White was the guy I would have thought, but he returns on a 3-year deal. And then Torrey Craig agrees to a 2-year deal. Chicago is in middling territory. They're in the middle of all this stuff going on with these contracts with Vooch and DeMar DeRozan's getting to the point where his contract is almost up, and Zach LaVine's on the trade market. And I'm not happy at all, and neither are Bulls fans. I'm not happy with where they are as a franchise and as a roster construction. And again, these 3 moves you're just in Midland. You're literally going to be in Midland. You're going to be no better than a 6 seed probably, and no worse than or no better than a 6 seed and no worse than a 10 or an 11. So I don't know. I don't understand this team and this roster and the direction, but they kind of also have handicapped themselves some with some of these deals. So it's going to be a work in progress, and I honestly wouldn't even cry about a full rebuild there because what do you really have other than Ayo Dosunmu? So I think they go full teardown or should go full teardown. But again, I'd love to have somebody on the other end of this conversation. Maybe we'll bring him up in a few weeks with different guests. Also, Trivia Showdown's coming back soon, which is really, really fun. Putting those things together right now. I've got a lot of that writing I got to do to get that, the state series moving again and get out next Monday, which those will, by the way, be released every Monday through the rest of July. So I believe it's July 10th, 17th, 24th, and 31st. Cleveland Cavaliers returned Karis LeVert on a 2-year deal. They've been looking for Karis LeVert insurance for so long, and they said, well, on the market, how about Karis LeVert? But nope. Actually, they got Georges Niang as well from the Philadelphia 76ers to a 3-year deal, and then they acquired Max Strus in a sign-and-trade, and I believe they gave up Shetty Osman in that deal in a couple of seconds. Again, wasn't a lot. Strus's number was high, but again, in the current CBA and where we're heading, that deal was pretty normal. That is a normal, I believe it was something north of 30 or 40 million not annually, but in totality over 3 or 4 years. So, what you're getting from Max Strus, we saw how inconsistent he was, and a lot of the Heat role players were. We'll get to some other ones in a second there. But just seeing what he provided when he was on and when he was giving the best ability of his, which is shooting and then just good positional team defense. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers did get it overall. I'm not doing grades with this, but they did a really good job here. Dallas is very intriguing here because they got Seth Curry on a 2-year deal. Dante Exum makes his NBA return. I was, top 5 most in on Dante Exum guys you could have known in the draft world back then. I wasn't even doing the draft that seriously, but just loved what he provided, and it was like basically a guy you just bet on the shot, and the shot never came around, unfortunately. But Dante Exum makes his return on a 1-year deal. Kyrie Irving returns on a 3-year, I think it's $127 million or something like that contract, crazy annual amount. I think this is an overpay because I just don't understand who they were competing with. But ultimately, as we know with Kyrie Irving, he probably isn't a Dallas Maverick in the next 12 to 18 months. So I don't really care about a 3-year deal here. And I think the last year had some stuff tied to it that made it interesting with his departure. So, and then Dwight Powell, I think this is a no-brainer if they're the best team that can pay him. Dwight Powell returns on a 3-year deal, continues to give them the big man depth that they're trying to build. But they obviously acquired Derek Lively, Dwight Powell, and some others, and they just they need to have those big men ready in rotation. Omax Prosper is another one as well they got in the draft. So they're shoring up the front line, which I really like because I think it provides Luka some help on offense, and it provides Luka even more help on defense. We hope. The Denver Nuggets had a pretty quiet offseason, but they did go pretty heavy positional fit in the draft. They got Jalen Pickett. They got Hunter Tyson. They got a couple other guys. They obviously lost Bruce Brown. We'll get to him in a minute. Bruce Brown, unfortunately, had to walk for Denver because they were only able to pay him just shy of $10 million a year, which I think it was like 9 point something, which complete underpay. Bruce Brown deserves way more. I think he got more than probably he was even expecting. But Justin Holiday on a 1-year deal come back to Denver. I think that's minimal unless they get some point guard injury issues in the regular season next year. Reggie Jackson on a 2-year deal. They played the guy like 14 minutes in the playoffs or something crazy like that total. And then this is just what I call the locker room deal. DeAndre Jordan returns on a multi-year deal, thus solidifying that there are some guys that will just get really good multi-year contracts even later in their career because of what they provide. And DeAndre Jordan is one of those locker room guys. He's a very, very good teacher, a very good big man, just really, really Udonis Haslem-esque is what I get from him as a vibe. Detroit Pistons get Monty Morris as part of a sign and trade with the Wizards. Very simple deal there. Monty Morris is a contributor. Ironically enough, he was on a free agency show with Shams and Stadium, and then 4.5 hours later signs a sign and trade with the Pistons. I thought that was weird, but good for the Pistons. They've got 72 guards right now. Can't wait to see how they figure out how to play Sasser and Cade and Ivy and Morris and a few others I'm probably forgetting right now. Killian Hayes, I think, is still there, hopefully. But yeah, Detroit, nothing really there. Golden State Warriors, getting to the middle of the league here. Draymond Green returns on his 4-year. I want to say it was $100 million or just a little bit more. Again, these don't have the dollars in front of me, which is really dumb. But just the stay home tax, right? The Sacramento Kings were going to get interesting and throw some money at him probably, or maybe that was going to help drive the price up. But ultimately, after seeing the Jordan Poole trade, there's about a 90% chance Draymond Green comes back in any capacity. Obviously, needs to make sure he gets his bag. I think the future of Clay is definitely up in question from a financial standpoint. I wonder if he's the guy that takes the hometown discount to stick around and keep this core together for even more, or with new GM Mike Dunleavy, do we see some interesting moves? He also was, again, he's the same guy that said Jordan Poole was going to be there on all 4 years of his contract, and Jordan Poole was traded less than a month later. So obviously, Klay Thompson means more to the Warriors organization than Jordan Poole ever was or will ever have been. So I think that's important to note. But Corey Joseph agrees to a 1-year deal, shoring up the backcourt even more. Very good contributor for Detroit last year on a pretty young. Not much winning on that team, so Corey Joseph was a good piece there. And then Chris Paul is obviously the big thing. We talked about that at the top with Ryan on the NBA Draft Recap show. You can click at the top of the eye on YouTube, whichever side it is on, and you can see the opener of that. We talked about Chris Paul joining the Warriors. The Houston Rockets, this is probably the most negative I'm going to be. Sorry, Rockets fans. I really do love and appreciate you on Rockets Twitter, but I can't justify paying Dylan Brooks $20 million a year for any reason or any why or anyone. 4 years, $20 million annually. Dylan Brooks, not a fan of that. Jeff Green, don't really care because ultimately he got his ring with the Nuggets, and I can see why. A veteran 1-year contract, probably the last one of his career, or one of the last ones of his career. The Rockets aren't in a position to be signing veterans to try to help them win games when they have so many young guys they can continue to play and develop. Kevin Porter Jr. obviously is going to probably get slid down the rotation. Amen Thompson needs to play, but it's not going to happen if you sign Dylan Brooks and Jeff Green and Jock Landale that agrees to a 4-year deal, which shows you how important that, when you step into your role in the NBA as a player, you have to prove that you're able to get that done. And he did with Phoenix, and I think that's what inked him this deal. Again, I also think he's going to help them win, so I'm not a fan of these win-now moves for the Rockets. I think it was too early, but then again, you have the cap space. Somebody was going to use it, and I guess if you're justifying the cap space for a guy like Dylan Brooks, who's I think in his late 20s, so still I guess in his 20s, if you want to count that as a young guy deal, and actually I'm going to look it up because I want to make sure I'm not crazy if he's older than I think, because I remember when he was at Oregon, he's 27 years old, so still going to help a team supposed to be entering into what we would consider the prime of his career. And then Fred VanVleet, 3 years, 100 and whatever it was, $30 million. I just can't. I can't justify that at all. Even for the Rockets, who have the cap space and want to, give him shots and give him opportunity, and they want a guy that wins now. I don't understand that. I just don't know what other team was giving him that kind of contract. So I can understand from Fred VanVleet and Clutch's camp, I believe, if he's still with Clutch there, he was going to get his bag. And it is what it is. He went to a place where that has the most opportunity for him, probably, despite all the young guys that I think make more sense playing. So I don't understand. The Houston Rockets altogether, if I'm not giving grades today, like I said, but I would give it a big fat F. Indiana Pacers, let's roll through this. Bruce Brown agrees to a 2-year deal. If I remember correctly, this is, and let me just make sure I got this right, because this number was very, very high. 2 years, $45 million. CAA client there, so completely deserving of that after he was probably the most important role player in the NBA Finals, especially on the winning team. So very, very smart move and thought process there for Bruce Brown. Let me get my tracker back in front of me. Let me make sure that I've got this. But Bruce Brown, I do think it was a really good deal for the Pacers. The other one was Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin was traded from New York for a couple of seconds to Indiana. Indiana is just trying to bolster people that are athletic and people that can, take this roster and take this team to a whole nother level with Tyrese Halliburton as their lead guard. I completely understand where they're coming from on this, and I just think this is a good deal. I didn't give up on Obi by any stretch of the imagination. But at the end of the day, for a couple of seconds that, the Indiana Pacers have a lot of, I think Obi Toppin is a great deal. And then Tyrese Halliburton, like I said earlier, is part of that 2020 draft class to get those 5-year extensions. Completely worth it. The Clippers, KJ Martin is acquired via a trade from the Rockets. Still no concrete details on what that is. If not, again, not in front of me. Mason Plumlee returns on a 1-year, I believe it was $8 million deal, using either part of their mid-level or whatever mid-level they had left there. And then Russell Westbrook returns on a 2-year deal. I believe, if I'm correct, this was in the range or ballpark of 2 years, $8 million. So this is giving you an idea of a guy like Russell Westbrook, who we've obviously very publicly criticized over the years, we being almost everybody in the media at some point. I think this is the good deal for aging athletic point guard that wants to contribute to a winning team. And obviously this is probably a one last time, I think we would call it on the Bill Simmons podcast, the one last time group for the Clippers. I think after this year, anything's up in the air for their future with that roster. So, 2-year deal for him at least gives him financial flexibility for 2 more years to control where he might go after that on like a ring chase type deal. I do think the Clippers are going to be in playoff contention here. I just don't know how big of a finals contender they are because of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George's health. All right, the other team across town, the Los Angeles Lakers, shockingly made a million deals, but they had the flexibility to do that this year. Rui Hachimura returns on a 3-year deal. Jackson Hayes comes over from New Orleans on a 2-year deal. Taurean Prince comes over from Minnesota on a 1-year deal. They ink Austin Rivers on a contract that pulls him back there. Nobody matched it to my knowledge. Nobody put it out there. Nobody like tried to mess with the Lakers, which I thought was shocking. 4-year deal for him. Cam Reddish agrees to a 2-year deal. They bring D'Angelo Russell back for a 2-year deal, and then Gabe Vincent on a 3-year deal. So after last year when we were starting Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook and what was it? It was like Juan Toscano Anderson and LeBron and AD. This is so much better. This is a younger, better shooting, in principle, of course. Jackson Hayes and others don't really shoot that well there. But I think the idea of the construction of this team is better. And I don't want to spend forever on this, but I'm just like A+. I'm very happy with what they had. They retained their assets very, very, very well. Gives you flexibility for the trade market again. Contracts that are really, really good size, really good tradable assets. So I do think that this puts him in position to be able to make the best decision moving forward, whether it's keep this team together and have a full year, right? Have a full offseason to work with LeBron and AD and really push forward into the new season. I do think that they run with most of these guys through the year, and I think the one that is obviously going to be eyeballed in trade pieces is going to be D'Angelo Russell. I'm also really excited to see Cam Reddish, hopefully with a good opportunity. I hope he doesn't get stuck to the 10th or 11th man down the bench. I hope he actually gets minutes and he can prove kind of that new opportunity, new ability in a better role, basically. Memphis Grizzlies, Desmond Bane also is one of the guys that got a big 5-year extension. I believe his was just north of $200 million, $207 over 5 years. Derrick Rose agrees to a multi-year deal to help shore up some of the 20-ish games. I think 25 games that John Morant's out early in that season since they don't have Tyus Jones anymore. And then Marcus Smart comes over in that 3-team trade. I love the Marcus Smart acquisition for Memphis. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to work out great for all parties there. The Miami Heat get Thomas Bryant on a 2-year deal, a guy we didn't see play much in Denver for their title run. Kevin Love returns on a 2-year deal. Not surprised if they're just going to keep trying to win with these older guys, which we see based on their roster construction, what they're going to probably do. Losing Strus and Vincent's going to hurt, so I think this is kind of another one more year thing and figure it out unless they're completely and entirely in the Damian Lillard sweepstakes, which no big, moves in free agency, letting guys walk, opening up cap space. That's probably all signs pointing towards Damian Lillard, at least. And then Josh Richardson on a 2-year deal as well. The Milwaukee Bucks got Malik Beasley on a 1-year deal. Had the most bench three-pointers last year for the Lakers in the entire NBA. That fact blew my mind because I feel like every time I watch Malik Beasley, that wasn't the case. But the facts speak for themselves. So great piece for the Bucks off the bench. Jay Crowder returns on a 1-year deal. Hopefully he can get back to playoff form. Brook Lopez, apparently his camp messed with the Rockets, which is supposed to be why the Ty Washington deal happened and the Usman Garuba deal to Atlanta. I know that there's some deals that I don't have in front of me on this tracker, but I do know that one happened, and it was probably because of Brook Lopez's camp saying they were going to go to the Rockets, and then I guess the Bucks made it work in the final hour. They brought Brook Lopez back on a team-friendly deal. Robin Lopez agrees to a deal to join his brother, which is really fun. I don't know or think they've ever done that. Correct me if I'm wrong on Twitter or in the comments. And then Chris Middleton, after declining his player option, returns on a 3-year deal. Very, very good offseason for the Bucks there as they're going to try to figure out, their pieces. They're probably also a deadline and a buyout option team as well. I could see them getting aggressive there to really make a good playoff and finals push because they do have the talent, at least at the top, to figure that out, as Drew Holiday is getting towards the end of his career, probably, as he said before. He may not play another contract after this current one. So they need to win while they have the opportunity. When you have a 25 to 6 or 7-year-old Giannis, whatever he has gotten, I mean, super young for what he's given the NBA and what he's given the Bucks. Also, too, I think it is important to note the arthroscopic, or cleanup surgery he had. I think it was announced this morning or last night. Just keep an eye on that. If that happens more than one time, you start getting nervous. And a lot of the Twitter doctors were freaking out. I'm like, all things considered, it is a small surgery. But when you're a big guy with really, brittle knees because you're so big, I mean, I'm not saying Bucks fans should be nervous. Just know that Giannis Antetokounmpo getting a knee surgery in the prime of his career in June or July, that's, just remember that it happened, and, hopefully it doesn't happen again. Minnesota, we got Nickeil Alexander-Walker returning on a 2-year deal. I think that's a good deal for both parties. Troy Brown is going to be going to Minnesota. Anthony Edwards, like I said, was from that class 2020. They got 5-year extensions. And I think the Shake Milton deal is actually really good for Shake Milton, just like I thought it was good for him in Philly, but the opportunity was inconsistent, to say the least. I do think that he'll play a valuable role for Minnesota, kind of that Torian Prince role. Not necessarily the same positional fit, but that kind of idea of a role player that can come in and shoot and play defense. So I believe in that deal being good for both parties. Minnesota overall obviously is not going to fix everything, because they've got some really crazy contracts with some really with some really large long deals. But I do think, based on what they do with Mike Conley and some of the backcourt options there, hopefully they can just hand the Anthony Edwards keys over, maybe figure out a cat deal moving forward. I'm not going to break that down necessarily in detail today, but I think it's going to be a very interesting couple of months and maybe into next year for Minnesota, because this team just is stuck between two things. They're kind of like the Warriors there, where they had the young core and the veterans. So definitely very interesting for Minnesota. All right, getting down into the back half of the league here. The New Orleans Pelicans returned Herb Jones on a 4-year deal. Love this. He's a great positional, switchable defender, can defend multiple positions at the point of attack. Also is continuing to develop as a shooter. And then Cody Zeller on a 1-year deal. Played some meaningful minutes there last year, I believe, for Miami. So New York Knicks, should be no surprise to anyone that Dante DiVincenzo add the fourth Villanova backcourt mate or wing mate here in New York. 4-year deal for Dante DiVincenzo. He joins Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart as guys that will be playing from Villanova in New York next year. The Oklahoma City Thunder basically retooled everything, or just continue to bring in contracts and bring in guys for picks and for money. So Patty Mills joins via trade with the Nets. That was a multi-part deal there, I believe. Victor Oladipo makes his return to Oklahoma City, basically for cap space for the Heat, and the Thunder have plenty of opportunity there. They're taking in second-round picks in some of these deals. And then Jack Wright agrees to a 2-year deal as well. Somebody who I guess was part of the Nuggets last year. The name rang a bell. I had to do some research, but Jack White was on the Nuggets last year. So Orlando Magic get Joe Ingles on a 2-year deal. Seems like a really good veteran presence for some of their front court or wing depth there. I'm not saying this means they're going to make a 6-seed or a 5-seed push, but Joe Ingles is a winning player, getting another contract in the league. And then Mo Wagner returns on a 2-year deal. Whenever your second-best player is Franz Wagner, his brother, who's one of the best players in the NBA at his age and his position, of course, you should probably bring in his brother on a 2-year deal, which makes sense for everybody. Love this deal for both parties. Patrick Beverley agrees to a 1-year deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. This is a go and try to win a ring deal for a guy like Pat Bev, and I do think this is a good place for him for his playoff potential and what he provides from a defensive standpoint, as well as if Philly doesn't blow it up with, obviously, Harden's going to be moved here in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, maybe. That's something we haven't even addressed yet. Harden requesting a trade from Philadelphia, signs his 1-year or player option deal with 30-something million, and then requests a trade immediately. So I really don't know where he's going and how it's going to happen. But Patrick Beverley, assuming that Harden does come back, if he doesn't, then obviously we'll know that there's some uncertainty with the rest of this playoff push or the rest of this title contention with Joel Embiid. But just know if James Harden gets traded, I'm keeping a really, really close eye on Joel Embiid's future in Philadelphia. Patrick Beverley, though, 1-year deal. Love it for both sides. Bradley Beal obviously is now a Phoenix Sun. He was part of the 3 guys, Bradley Beal, Jordan Gooden, and Isaiah Todd, who went to Phoenix as part of that Wizards-Pacers 3-teamer. They also just loaded up on veterans. Very Lakers-esque, but that next tier down of role players the Suns had, obviously, and limited financially. So they got Keita Bates-Diop on a 2-year team-friendly deal. Drew Eubanks to replace the Jock Landale minutes there. Eric Gordon actually accepted the Phoenix Suns contract offer despite some of the other offers he had out available on the market with other contenders or for higher pay. So Eric Gordon thinks that there's an opportunity there, which I do think helps them with their, he'll definitely be the 5th or 6th guy there to really get meaningful minutes, but he'll be the guy outside of their big 4. or big three, I guess, technically. Damian Lee returns on a one-year deal. Chimezi Metu is also on a one-year deal. Josh Okogie, we've seen in some playoff minutes in the last couple of years on a two-year deal. And then they get Yuta Watanabe from I believe the Nets is where he was last playing on a one-year deal. So Phoenix, just like I said, retooled around the edges. It doesn't necessarily solve their depth issues, but it at least gives them more bodies that are at some point or another in their career, whether they're younger, older, different situation, Eric Gordon, etc., they were contributors at some point. So the Portland Trailblazers, excuse me, signed Jeremy Grant back on a 5-year deal. This was before the Damian Lillard stuff, but I feel like we kind of could have known if Damian Lillard's whole thing was Jeremy Grant was part of their future, wanted to see as part of the future. He did average 20.5 points per game last year, third on the Blazers behind Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons. So 5 years, 160. Obviously, the reason he averaged what he did in Detroit and got that big contract before this one was because he was a good stats, bad team. I'm sorry. I've always just felt like that about Jeremy Grant. I do think from a defensive standpoint, he's somebody that brings good value. But offensively, I'm not going to be happy if he's my second best option or my most highest paid player if Damian Lillard gets traded. So I don't understand this deal. And at the end of the day, obviously, you don't want the asset to just walk away and lose. But I think I would have been kind of okay with it if I'm Portland, especially if we're going to shift towards the younger movement. I don't want a guy taking away quality minutes and shots from Shaedon Sharpe and from Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons and my young core. So interesting there. Sacramento Kings get Alex Len on a one-year deal, just shoring up the big man problem that they had last year against the Warriors. Now, obviously, I don't think an extra big man would have won them the series probably, but it would have made some of those games that were close even more interesting. They definitely needed a big man presence other than Domantas Sabonis. Trey Lyles on a 2-year deal, and then Sabonis agrees to a multi-year extension as well. And then they bring in Sasha Veznikov, who I believe, if I'm correct, not getting him mixed up with somebody else, was the 6'9" EuroLeague MVP just recently on a 3-year, $20 million deal. So obviously, if he gets Luka was one of the best 17-year-olds we've ever seen in European basketball. But just as like a, hey, by the way, this guy is really good, won in a really good league, one of the best leagues in in the world, other than in the United States in the NBA, and was a meaningful contributor. So, yeah. I love this deal for the Kings. Provides shooting as well at 6'9". San Antonio did very just normal San Antonio stuff. They got Julian Champagnie. I can always get his name messed up. He comes back on a 4-year deal. He's having an unbelievable summer league so far as we're recording this. Trey Jones returns on a 2-year deal. Would have loved this. I would have been really dumb if San Antonio let him walk, and I didn't expect them to let him walk. But and then they got, Josh will appreciate this one, Sandro Mamukelishvili. That sounds about right. Josh corrected me on that multiple times. He agrees to a 2-year deal with San Antonio. Watch him be a very valuable role player for the Spurs. I just wouldn't be shocked by that. But the guy does have talent. Last 3 teams here. Toronto Raptors, they get Jalen McDaniels, not to be confused with Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota. This is the Charlotte Hornets McDaniels. On a 2-year deal, or was on the Charlotte Hornets. And then Jakob Poeltl returns on a 4-year deal. There was no team that I feel like was even really in the Jakob Poeltl sweepstakes there, so they were competing against themselves. Brought him back there. Makes total sense, regardless of the confusion and direction they might be going in. I do think, obviously, Fred VanVleet getting out the door, they may not try to win necessarily, but then again, this is Masai Ujiri. This is the Toronto Raptors. I could see them just trying to make a good playoff push in the East. I'm not necessarily saying they'll probably be a top 6 seed, but they'll at least be fighting in that range. I mentioned Fred VanVleet going out. They brought Dennis Schroeder in, agrees to a 2-year deal after being on the Los Angeles Lakers. So really like Dennis Schroeder. I like what he provides from a point of attack defender standpoint, as well as just a reliable ball handler and passer. So very good deal there. I don't think you replace Fred VanVleet with Dennis Schroeder very easily. That's not, that's a big ask, but it is an improvement for sure. It is a not improvement, because obviously Fred VanVleet was very good last year, but it's at least a good piece, I guess you could say, a good replacement. I'm fumbling on my words there. The Utah Jazz, last 2 teams here. Jordan Clarkson agrees to a 3-year extension. Love this as a team like Utah, who is young, who's winning, who shocked people last year with some of the just just some of the plays and moments and wins that they had. He was a big part of that. And then, like we talked about earlier, at the very, very top with Atlanta, John Collins joins the Hawks joins the Utah Jazz from the Hawks as part of that trade. They basically bought really low, right? In year 3, John Collins was a 20-point per game scorer, 10 rebounds, shot really well from the free throw line, shot really well from the field and from 3. Just overall had a really great year. And if you're getting that kind of value, worst case scenario, you're still getting a valuable front court piece to help shore up your rotational depth with Lowry and with Walker Kessler and Ochai Agbaji and all the stuff they did in the draft this year. I love this deal. I think getting John Collins at a ridiculously cheap price, giving up Rudy Gay in seconds. I mean, Utah, Danny Ainge does it again, right? And then the Washington Wizards, last but certainly not least, they get Tyus Jones, Danilo Gallinari, and Mike Muscala as part of the 3-team trade with the Grizzlies and the Celtics we talked about earlier that sent Marcus Smart to Memphis, and it sent Kristaps Porzingis to Boston. Kyle Kuzma returns on a 4-year deal. I'm not sure the market was there for him. Maybe if it was to a contender, maybe on a lesser contract or somebody that's trying to compete. So I don't disagree with him taking the bigger contract here, because ultimately you're not stuck with a team on a big contract. We all know that now in the NBA. He can very easily request a trade and get out anytime he would like to very soon. So 4-year deal for Kyle Kuzma. Jordan Poole obviously was part of that Chris Paul trade, sending him back to Washington from Golden State, and Ryan Rollins was part of that as well. So Chris Paul obviously gets traded from Phoenix to Washington to Golden State. Jordan Poole comes back in that deal. They're young, they're bad, they're going to try to contribute, and it's going to be very, very interesting. And then Landry Shamet is coming into Washington as part of that Bradley Beal trade, which sent Bradley Beal to Phoenix with the Suns and the Pacers there as that 3-teamer. So that is everything that I have in front of me. I definitely missed something, but 40 minutes of good free agency, talking to a camera and talking to myself and talking to you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Let me know your favorite team's free agency deal that you liked. Maybe they're one you didn't like, or they're your least favorite. Anything I might have missed. I know I definitely missed something because I remember Twitter's been crazy the last couple of days trying to keep up with everything, but I tried my best. I got everything in front of me with the NBA.com. If there's something on there that I didn't get to, you can blame the NBA.com tracker and the NBA.com staff, but no, those guys do a great job. Please don't blame them. I'm very happy to say back into the flow of things. Like I said, Trivia Showdown, just some housekeeping items to go over. Trivia Showdown will be back here in the next couple of weeks. Be on the lookout on the ECB feed, the Everything College Basketball feed at House. Let me make sure I point at the right corner, at house-enterprise.com. To be able to find all the ECB podcasts coming out. We've got some really good interviews with some college basketball coaches coming out, as well as just some other written opportunities there. Like I said, the state ranking series, we're going to be getting together and doing our magazine soon. So a lot of really great stuff coming from me and coming from the guys at House Enterprise and Everything College Basketball. So please check that stuff out. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're on a podcast platform like Apple, Spotify, or any of our other great podcast platforms, don't forget to give it a 5-star review and a rating. It's all greatly appreciated. Give 2 Pointers a follow on Twitter at 2 Pointers, and then at the 2 Pointers Podcast on every other major podcast platform or social media platform. I appreciate the support. Don't forget, use code 2 Pointers for $20 off your first order. SeatGeek.com or link in the top of the description will take you directly into the app to sign in, make your first purchase, and get $20 off. Code 2 Pointers, TWOPOINTERS, code 2 Pointers. If you enjoyed today's episode, again, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for all the support over the last couple of weeks. Don't forget to check out the state rankings part 1 that I have posted below. It talks about states 51, including DC, through 41, and we'll talk about what that looks like over the next couple of weeks. You'll see them coming out every single Monday on house-enterprise.com. Thank you so much for listening to this solo, figuring myself out, rambling podcast. Had a lot to talk about, had a lot to cover and preview and bring up. So thank you guys so much for the support over the last couple of weeks. Continue to support throughout the summer as you'll see Trivia Showdown. I really appreciate everything that you guys do, all the interaction, all the engagement, all the comments. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett. We'll see you later.